Doctor, tell me, what's wrong with me?
My dear patient, I'm afraid it is not looking good.
But doctor, what is your diagnosis?
My dear patient, I regret to inform you that you are very much at risk of turning into a horse.
Doctor, I might have misheard you. Did you say I'm at risk of turning into an animal?
Yes, my dear patient, you are very much at risk of waking up any day now, finding that you have been transfigured into a member of the equine family.
Doctor, with all due respect, have you lost your mind? How could I possibly turn into an animal?
My dear patient, will you calm down? I'm serious. So if you will just sit and listen, I will explain this diagnosis. And not just to you, but to every other patient in this room, for we are all at risk of turning into horses.
Having cast this Kafkaesque shadow over the room, I'm sure you're wondering what this talk is actually about. Well, it's about economics, it's about the labor market, and ultimately it's about our human capacity for self-reinvention. But what, you're probably wondering, has this got to do with the furry creature standing behind me? Well, I'd like to begin by referring to the Nobel Prize winner in economics, Wassily Leontief, who said that the role of humans as the most important factor of production is bound to diminish in the same way that the role of horses was first diminished and then eliminated. Leontief made this statement in the context of increasing automation in the 1980s. What does the situation look like today? Well, automation has continued at an unrelenting pace all across the world, but now we have this compounded by the arrival of artificial intelligence and the whole gamut of applications it has. So if anything, Leontief's warning is more relevant and more urgent to us today than it was all those decades ago when he first said it. But why horses? How does this analogy work exactly? Well, let's refer to history. Not so long ago, horses were a vital part of most human economies. They were absolutely everywhere. In agriculture, busy plowing fields, milling grain. In transport, they'd be in charge of moving goods and people around within and between cities. In conflict, they were absolutely instrumental when it came to moving materiel. In short, horses were a ubiquitous and vital part of most human economies. However, all this changed in the 20th century. One day in the 20th century, horses woke up to realize that they were suddenly unemployed. They had been substituted by a new technology that could do their work better than they could. The blood and the muscle of horses was substituted by the steel and the oil of the automobile. The internal combustion engine utterly replaced horses and other similar animals. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the crux of this talk. This is what Leontief was warning us about. Today, as we step into the AI revolution, we risk being the people on that graph. Instead of horses, it could be us, potentially. Now, this is, of course, not the first revolutionary transformation that we humans have had to go through. We've been through that before, and we've managed to self-reinvent. So in order to have some context before we proceed to talk about the AI revolution, I'd like to revisit history once again and to touch upon two important revolutions that we went through as a species. The first is the agricultural revolution. It's easy to forget, but this was an absolute transformation in the way we humans lived and worked. We went from being nomadic hunters and gatherers to living in settlements and actually working the land in order to produce our food and goods to trade with other people. So, how did work look in this period? Were we relevant economic agents? Was our work valuable? Well, of course it was. In fact, arguably, this is when work, as we understand it today, was first invented. So, of course, we were relevant economic agents. More recently, we have another massive transformation, the Industrial Revolution. Again, complete reinvention of the way we lived and worked. What happened work-wise? Were we relevant economic agents? Was the human workforce of any value? Of course it was. Humans went from toiling in fields to toiling in factories. We remained relevant. Now, in general terms, both of these revolutions had their pros and their cons. Amongst the disadvantages, in both cases, we have an impact on our quality of life, either temporary or permanent, due to things like pollution, the spread of disease. But there have also been some great advantages. Notably, we have the increase in the numbers of our species. Our population expanded in both cases, and most dramatically since the Industrial Revolution. Simultaneously, another great success is that we've managed to decrease the number of people living in extreme poverty. They've been lifted out of poverty, largely thanks to these revolutions. So, all in all, in general terms, there's this mix of pros and cons, right? But I think overall we can assume that the indicators generally point to these revolutions being success stories. As we enter the AI revolution, we're also going to have pros and cons. Amongst the advantages, we have a radical increase in productivity, which is coming our way. But we also have a downside. And one very important part of that is the impact to our labor markets and the prospect, potentially, of mass unemployment. So, in order to understand one of the unique challenges that we face with this AI revolution, because it is different, there is one unique challenge. But in order to understand it better, let's first review the process of value creation in any economy. In essence, an input is taken, transformed, and then you have an output, which will be of a certain value to other people, which you can then exchange. When it comes to labor, human labor, we have two types of input that we can provide in an economic system, namely our intelligence and our physical work. You can see these two inputs that we provide in this chart that I created. You will see them on the vertical axis. Our intelligence and our physical work. Or to give it an alternative name, brain power and muscle power. On the horizontal axis, you will see the different periods of time that we've been through as a species, starting with the age of hunting and gathering, all the way up to the present day with the digital age. And if we first focus on the bottom row, you will see that initially, all the physical work that was invested into economic processes came from us, human muscle. Our bodies did the work. But very quickly, we started to outsource that work to other things. We started outsourcing it to animals, for example, horses. and then more recently to machines. Most of the physical work that is done today is not done by us, it is done by our machines. In contrast with this, we have the top row about intelligence. And as you can see, throughout all of human history, the human brain has reigned supreme. It has been the only input up until today. We now face this unprecedented exception where our monopoly of the input of intelligence is being challenged by our own creation. One of our own technologies is now encroaching upon that area that used to be only ours. What does this mean? Well, first of all, it's good news. Just as with the bottom row, it means we're beginning to outsource that work to other things. It means that as a species, we're going to be able to work a lot less relative to our productivity. It's good news. But this is a double-edged sword. At the same time, we're going to face a number of challenges, most notably, in my opinion, disruptions to the labor market and potentially unemployment, as I was saying. So, to understand the gravity of this situation that we're facing, I'd like to refer to a couple of international organizations that have created estimates of how things are going to start to change. Last year, the WEF, the World Economic Forum, published a report in which they estimate that around 40% of all working hours could be directly impacted by AI large language models. Bear in mind that this is just one application of artificial intelligence, capable of slashing 40% of the time we have to invest when we work. What are companies going to do when they realize this? Are 40% of employees suddenly going to become redundant? Similarly, the OECD estimates that about 27% of all jobs are at high risk of disappearing in this AI revolution. Again, what's going to happen to those people when they lose their jobs? Will they be able to switch easily? Will they be able to reskill somehow? How long will that take? So, this is an enormous challenge that we're going to face as societies, and it raises many, many questions. And people are asking themselves these questions all around the world. But today I'd like to focus specifically on this country, Mexico, a developing nation with a lot of potential and which will undoubtedly also suffer from these disruptions. So, when faced with the question, what can we do in order to maximize the benefits of the AI revolution whilst also minimizing this negative disruptive potential? The short answer is that nobody is sure about exactly how to go about it. It's a tough question. I would like, nevertheless, to share with you 3 concrete ideas that will allow us to start taking steps in the right direction. Step number 1 is actually very simple: raising awareness. Too many people across the world and in countries like ours are ignorant of the extent of the impact that AI could have for their own jobs just a few years into the future. So next time you're having a conversation with a friend or with a neighbor, maybe raise this topic. It is only by knowing about a problem that you can hope to solve it. Step number 2 is that we must improve our cognitive abilities. This may sound a little bit strange, given that AI is already surpassing us in many cognitive tasks. However, that is not the point. The point is that in order to make the best use of a smart technology, we need to be smart ourselves. It won't work otherwise. So, this is important, but the picture that we're seeing from around the world, if we look at the PISA results from last year, is a little bit, doesn't doesn't leave us feeling very optimistic. Most countries around the world have either stagnated or even dropped when it comes to their results regarding things like reading, mathematics, and sciences. And Mexico is no exception. We need to improve our skills, improve our knowledge. So next time you have some free time, sure, do something trivial to relax, watch your favorite TV series, but maybe only watch one episode. And spend the rest of the time learning something new. Anything, but we need to nurture our brains. And the third and final idea is that we need to be much more civically and politically engaged. When it comes to these huge challenges that impact all of us in different ways, we all need to be part of that conversation. We're all going to feel the ripple effects of the AI revolution in different ways. So we need to be much more civically and politically engaged in order to influence policy, which will in turn determine our future. So to sum up, number 1, be aware of the challenge. Share the information. Number 2, improve your skills and your education. By doing that, you might avoid becoming a horse. And number 3, be politically and civically engaged. We're going to have to answer some difficult questions, like, what do we do with those people who do, unfortunately, turn into horses? I'd like to conclude by quoting the brilliant, though controversial, winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine, Alexis Carrel, who said that man cannot remake himself without suffering, for he is both the marble and the sculptor. We have been endowed as humans with this unique capacity for self-reinvention. But this is never an easy task. So, my dear patients, the prognosis may seem grim, but let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. The AI revolution has enormous potential to improve our lives in unprecedented ways. Simultaneously, though, it'll be accompanied by enormous challenges, notably when it comes to unemployment and disruptions to the labor market. The AI revolution has already begun, so there's no time to waste horsing around. With these 3 concrete ideas I've shared today, we can begin to take steps in the right direction in order to make the most of this exciting new age that we're entering. And I'm optimistic about the future. We as a species have emerged successful from previous revolutions, and we will succeed again. Thank you.